Scrims aren't just for outside use. The guy here was in a barn next to a silo, and there was a hole in the ceiling above him where the sunlight was streaming down. I thought I'd be able to capture the high ratio of highlight to shadow by choosing an exposure halfway in between. But although my eyes could see detail in both, since our eyes and minds adjust to the exposure of whatever we're looking at, the camera with its single exposure could not. The sun completely blew out detail on his chest. There was nothing to bring back, even shooting raw. So I went outside and placed a scrim above him. This spread and evened out the lighting, so I had detail in both the highlights and the shadows. The histogram of the before shot shows only data at the ends, and almost none in the middle. The histogram of the after shot shows that we gained data in the middle, which means the image is less contrasty. Now this is a rare example where I like both the sunlight image and the scrimmed image. I had to be careful to expose this one carefully though, because it's really easy to overexpose it with such high contrast and mostly dark areas. Dropping the scrim in place made it a heck of a lot easier to get the right exposure, and the scrim also allowed the background to look brighter. Here's another sunlit image that I like, and this was done in her garage. I enjoy the window pane shadows, but what if she doesn't? We just drop a scrim in the path of the sunlight and pull the trigger again. Because the lighting is softer and not low key, I had her just wear the lighter shirt that she had under her flannel shirt. This is a pullback video to show the solution to the sunlight that was streaming through the window. In the final image I set up a scrim to diffuse that sunlight and a reflector to fill in the shadows. Hard sunlight coming through a window is just as difficult to work with inside as it is outside. In fact, the contrast, which is the main difficulty with sunlight, can be higher inside. A scrim does an excellent job of diffusing sunlight, whether it's outdoors or indoors. It just happens that in this particular image with diffused light, we lost the interesting sunlight and shadows on the floor and dresser. So since the camera was on a tripod and she didn't move much, I was able to combine the two images in Photoshop to get the nice sunlight effects on the floor and dresser, along with the soft light on her. The bushes and trees outside don't allow any direct light for the girl, but the sunlight bouncing off of the light carpet does. That's a problem. So a translucent scrim in its path in effect raises the height of the light. Because the sunlight is so bright, the problem is easy to see and thankfully just as easy to correct. You might be thinking, well, it'd be easy enough to just retouch those eye bags. But that's not the only flaw. Look at all the other uplighting issues. Obviously, this would be a very challenging situation. We'd have to work pretty hard to get rid of all of the sunlight and the contrast problems. So the easiest answer here was to close the garage door and let the sunlight come through the garage door windows to illuminate my scrims, and use that same light to strike my reflector for fill light. There's no need to show the disaster that would have happened had we not corrected that sunlight, so here's just the after picture. This topic will be about redirected sunlight as a way of dealing with a color problem. She's green here because of the sunlight bouncing off of the trees and the grass outside. So I went outside and set up my reflector to send sunlight into a scrim that I placed against the window. I reflected the light to the high part of the scrim because she's higher in the room inside and I want light to come from above the face. The result is a better color and skin tone, as shown in the image on the right. If a color cast is evenly distributed across an entire image, it can be neutralized in raw software. But rarely is the color of light uniform because it comes from many directions. Consequently, it has many different color casts. I chose this room for a portrait of a girl with a white dress. But as you can see, the primary light that the subject sees is sunlight reflected off of green trees. And here's where she'll be. I didn't do any color corrections to this image to show how strong that color cast is. Be aware that our minds often correct for that. But even with raw digital capture and Photoshop, it's difficult, if not impossible, to completely correct it. Here's a non-color corrected image of the girl. So on this image, I picked a spot with a green cast and click balanced it in the raw conversion software. But there still are impurities in the image because of other light casts in the room. See how green her shadow is? Yes, we could work on it in Photoshop, but then we'd have to work on every image we shoot in that spot. There's a better way. I went outside and reflected sunlight up to that second floor window. Back inside, you can see how beautiful and clean that light is. And the final result. Much better. As you can see from the previously color-corrected image on the left and the scrimmed image on the right, it's better to fix the light than fix the images in the computer. Here's another common problem with window light on a sunny day. Sunlight bouncing off the grass is green, but the sky is blue. That causes a cross-color problem I'll demonstrate in the next few slides. By the way, this window is on the north side of the house, and we've all heard how special north light is. Well, the only reason north light is desirable in our northern hemisphere is because the sun never comes in the window. Placing the white side of my reflector into the light from that window, you can see the color cast result of green grass illuminating the top and blue sky on the bottom. In this wonderful diagram, you can see how the bright sunlight reflecting off the green grass and the blue sky makes the subject look green on top and blue on the bottom. This is how we fix that problem. Reflect sunlight into a white translucent scrim, then into the window. That reflected and diffused sunlight into the scrim will overpower any green or blue light. To show what happens to this uncorrected color mixture, the subject on the left has a green upper body and blue lower body. The image on the right is what I wanted. Even color temperature from top to bottom. This diagram shows a situation that follows, where the skylight was coming down and the light reflected off the grass was going up. And here we see the solution of dropping a scrim in the doorway to catch and diffuse the stronger white light from the sky.
We've got green foliage straight out and then white sky above. So I dropped a scrim in the doorway and that evens out the lighting.
Notice his green face and the bright but neutral colored floor. That's because his face sees the foliage, whereas the floor sees the white sky. But here the scrim evened out the light, both in color and how the light is dispersed. The difficulty here is that all the bright light is high, while there are bushes and other dark objects on the ground. That causes a downward direction of light coming through the window. A translucent panel interrupts the strong direction of light and distributes it more evenly. The next two examples will show the benefit of using a scrim on the window when you run into this situation. Without the scrim in place, the high sky was brighter than the low bushes outside. That highlight is only visible to the lower part of her body, making the lower part of her body too light. The translucent panel in the window evened out the light from top to bottom. Sunlight was shooting through the window above him, so I scrimmed it. Without the scrim, you can see the overexposure problem. A scrim reduces and softens the light to a manageable level.